Welcome back. From Beryl, Chris, and Debbie, all the way to William, these are some of the named storms that are likely going to be on our radar this year. Joining me to talk about it, my friend and First Coast News meteorologist, Chief Meteorologist Tim Deegan. Hey, Tim.
What does that mean anyhow?
Which part of it?
The chief.
Oh, well,
I've never quite understood.
you
But anyhow,
run the show.
It's what's that?
You run the show. You run the whole operation
No,
over there.
let's be honest. Since you actually know how it works, you know I don't run the show. Good to see you.
It's good to see you,
I mean,
too.
I've been listening to you, so your voice sounds healthy, but you look healthy.
You look great. It's really nice to see your face.
I suspect the listeners are helping you stay healthy, so appreciate that.
They're keeping me on my toes.
Good.
Yeah.
Good.
And the weather, no doubt, is keeping you on yours.
It's never a given. It's not boring.
No.
No.
So this storm that we saw go through, this is a million superlatives. It's the strongest Atlantic storm ever observed in July. It's the earliest Category 5 in history. How many of these superlatives are you issuing these days?
Well, and I understand the laugh, and I used to laugh back in the 90s, but I do remember specifically saying on TV that look, no one particular meteorological event, storm, tornado, record heat, you name it, no one event in the 90s, in my opinion, was going to prove the greenhouse, that humans were indeed showing the greenhouse theory works, even though I did believe that humans back then were changing the climate. But I also said back then, but if we go through the decades and this one event becomes 10, becomes 100, becomes 1,000, becomes 1,000,000, please, I hope people wake up. And I guess the point I'm making is that even though Beryl was well forecast to become just a hurricane, forget about major, that far to the east, that early, and although we've been saying since the 90s, if we don't do something significant, our oceans are going to warm, and that's potential energy, and that just means sooner or later that potential energy out of chaos will become something. Even though all of that intellectually has been in my head now for 30 years, my wife knows that I was humbled when I saw that. It really shook me to my bones, and I thought, why do I feel that way if this was well forecast as this particular storm? We've been talking about it since the 90s. It just was another one of those times in whatever you want to call the last 30 years where we've been talking about the greenhouse gas crisis, the problem that us humans are causing. I don't mean it humbled me or caused me to tremble in that, oh, it's so terrible. Other than that, well, here we are, and so just to underline what you said. So we had never seen a hurricane that far to the east. And the reason is because although many of us may think of places east of Barbados as being warm and tropical and what's the big deal, no, because of the currents, because of upwelling coming off the coast of Africa, it's always been too cool this time of the year. It's just we've warmed up even the cool places to where they can produce a hurricane. But then we go beyond that, right? It was warm enough to produce a major hurricane. So it is shattering the record even a legitimate word? I mean, it would be beyond that. Then it gets into the Caribbean, and it becomes only the second Cat 5 ever. Think about that in human history. And then when you look at it, you say, and it happened 2 weeks earlier than Emily, which was 2005.
And when you say the only Cat 5, you mean in the month of June or in that area? There was only two?
Well, but by this time it was early July. But no, when we talk about the Atlantic Basin, that's the Atlantic, the Caribbean, and the Gulf. So whereas when it first became a hurricane and then a major, you would have to say we've never seen one that far to the east. There had been Audrey in '57 in the Gulf, and then I can't think of the storm Alma in '66 in the Caribbean. As far as a Category 3 hurricane.
But when you said we've only seen two Cat 5s, what in where? What?
In the Atlantic Basin.
Okay.
In our part of the world is not exaggerating to say. And then to realize, oh my gosh, And of those two, and the first one was Emily, which was during what we consider to be the greenhouse era. That was 2005. And now the second one, so this is only the second. Both have occurred in the last 19 years.
But we've had Cat 5s hit. Michael was a Cat 5, right?
But not this early in the season.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
that's, I'm sorry. Yeah, so that's the point. Because normally the waters are too cool.
Mm-hmm.
You're right. That Cat 5s, yeah, there's been plenty of Cat 5s, more in the last 20 years than we've seen in the last 60. But yeah, you expect that in late August and September. But ocean temperatures are right now what they typically are in August and September.
As a meteorologist, the speed with which these storms are forming and transforming into something more intense seems like it's probably getting more challenging by the day.
Well, so to talk about the general science of meteorology, we don't know all the reasons. We know some. So I don't want to sound like we're clueless. But we've known for at least 45 to 50 years that the nightmare hurricanes, yes, are the Cat 4 and 5s, but it just so happens meteorologically, those are the ones you expect to rapidly intensify. So it's not so much that we have this new thing of rapid intensifiers. It's the fact that the waters are warm enough to allow a Cat 4 and 5 to form, and the very nature of what allows that to happen almost implies that if the ingredients are there for a 4 to 5 to form, the ingredient is probably there for it to be a rapid intensifier. They almost come with each other. But you can imagine whether you're a mayor, an emergency manager, or a forecaster, that's the nightmare. Not only because it's so bad, but because you can't give people enough time to get out of harm's way.
I want to take a call from Joe in Atlantic Beach. Good morning, Joe. Go ahead.
Thank you so much. A great show. Given the immense impact of animal slaughter industry on the environment, our health, why are we not promoting a kind, healthy, and climate-friendly plant-based lifestyle? And I hope Mr. Deegan will request Mayor Deegan to sign the plant-based treaty to promote a plant-based lifestyle in our great city. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. I think I know exactly how Joe's smile looks because I think we've talked before. And here's what I will say is that if the word holistic means everything's connected and everything impacts us, you have a meteorologist and hopefully I'm not speaking too much for the mayor, but a mayor that does think that we can't just solve problems like this piecemeal. It is all connected. So at the very least, I personally think what Joe says, some of that makes sense.
You were talking about, for hurricanes, that rapid intensification can be known. But I'm thinking even of, there was a tornado in Detroit recently that the National Weather Service couldn't even get out ahead of because it happened so quickly and without warning. And so those sort of challenges as a meteorologist seem like those are getting more difficult.
Well, yeah, and in a way, a tornado is a different animal. So I hear you. If you can wish for such things, even with rapid intensifiers, I'd still want a hurricane because at least you're talking on days of preparation versus a tornado. Right. Sometimes you're right. Sometimes we can't verify what we're seeing on radar until we hear that the tornado hit, and then you combine it hitting in a place that far to the north and this early in the season. And as you know, as a communicator, for true communication to go on, people have to be listening. And my point is, if you're living in Detroit and it's May and some of the leaves have just come on, you're not even necessarily listening for a tornado warning, right? And so you're right. To me, that's another example of holistic, that this is a big picture problem. There was a book that was written back in 2005, 2006, and it was from who I think is a very well-respected scientist, and it was called "The Storms of Our Grandchildren." And the point that I loved in the title wasn't just focused on heat, and it wasn't just focused on us right now, but it's focused on all of this stuff that you're talking about that impacts us in ways that if we really don't think about it, we're going to miss solving the problem. Just because some people are dealing with things they've never done. I thought about this morning, that yes, Jamaica's used to hurricanes. Jamaica has had major hurricanes. But for people who've lived there for generations, they've never looked at a hurricane, at a Cat 5 heading their way in early July. It hasn't been part of their. I think some historians know. You could go back to. I'm rambling too long. I know.
No, you're good.
Okay. Well, historians who are out there know this, and that is that the Spanish, when they came to the Americas to get the gold, they knew that their ships laden with gold had to be leaving Cuba by about July and September or in August, because things were going to get bad. Well, that wouldn't work necessarily now. They'd be too late.
Tim Deegan, it is a delight to have you on my show. I appreciate that you came by, and I hope you come back soon during the season.
If you'll let me ramble on, I will come on.
100%.
For sure. Okay.
Anytime.